Loading hot takes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back into TwinTakes Fantasy Football, and today we are all dapper and dressed up because tonight is the official kickoff of the 2022 NFL season. It is here. Finally, very excited to see what all these projections and mock drafts have led up to for the upcoming season. And also, this will be the first ever week preview episode on TwinTakes Fantasy Football. Very excited to start in-season content for the first time. Going to talk some matchups I'm looking forward to, ones that are going to return some pretty good fantasy options, as well as my game of the week. Also going to kind of talk about and predict some of my guys for this week and that I have extreme confidence in to well outperform what they're projected to do. So without further ado, let's get into this first segment, which is again my matches to exploit. And the first one is going to be a little bit of a sleeper here, and I'm going to go with the Falcons versus the Saints. This is a game that has an over-under of 42.5 points with the Saints as 5.5 point favorites. So this leaves the Falcons with kind of a, pretty mediocre expected points of 18.5, but I think this calculation and expectation by Vegas is sorely mistaken. I think Falcons easily hit the over, and that's because Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is gone. He's one of the most underrated corners in the league. Also, Lattimore, I think for the good corner that he is, people tend to perceive him as an elite corner based off his rookie year production, and just the numbers over the past 3 years have not even come close to what he's been able to do his rookie season. So I think Lattimore, he's more of a name than actual production on the field and is a little overhyped for that reason. Conversely, on the opposite side of the ball, as you can probably predict from a lot of the preseason content here at TwinTakes, I am pretty high on the Falcons. Not high enough to say they're going to the playoffs, but I just think they're going to be better than people give them credit for. I loved what I saw from Mariota and Desmond Ridder in the preseason. Pretty high on a lot of their offensive weapons there, whether it's Algier or London, and the rookies coming in. I think it's going to be, a moderately dynamic offense. So with that being said, I am starting Patterson with full confidence. Pitts and London are obviously must starts. London, even with the injury, I'm starting him in my flex spot with full confidence. Even in super flex, I would venture to say Mariota would be my second quarterback. Just seeing that with the Saints, I expect there to be regression on the defensive side. I expect it's a divisional game. I expect it to be pretty hard fought and high scoring. And also from the standpoint that this is Dennis Allen's first game with the Saints. Obviously, takes time. There's growing pains with a new regime. So overall, I expect the Falcons to well outperform what they're projected to do here. Going on to my second matchup to exploit will be the Chiefs versus the Cardinals. And this one's probably a little bit more predictable because this has the highest over-under of the week at 53.5 points. Chiefs are favored by 6 points, giving them a whopping projected points of 29. Minimum 4 touchdowns projected, lots of fantasy points to go around. There's a lot of valuable assets in this game. Cards defense has regressed tremendously with the loss of Chandler Jones on that front line, and a lot of what the Cards defense projects to do this year is based on the assumption that Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons take that next step up, and I'm not exactly confident based on what I've seen in the preseason and from last year that both of those assets do take the next step up, as well as I'm just not confident in Cliff Kingsbury to use them correctly in his defensive system. They're both pretty big liabilities in coverage last year. So with the regression in the defensive back play and the anticipated not taking that next step up of the coverage, as well as the massive loss of Jones on that front line, I expect a lot of the Chiefs' offensive assets to churn. So MVS and Juju, I'm not super confident in on the full season scale, but this week, absolutely. I'm playing MVS. I'm playing Juju. Clyde EdwardsHelaire is absolutely my flex spot. I can't think of any better flex spot than Clyde EdwardsHelaire this weekend. Kelsey, Mahomes are absolute must starts. Conversely, on the opposite side of the ball is my third matchup to exploit this weekend, and Cardinals versus Chiefs. So even though the Chiefs are favored by 6 points, the fact that this has the highest over-under of any game this week at 53.5 leaves the Cardinals with projected 24.5 points, which is still, there's a lot of meat in the bones there for potential fantasy points. Chiefs lost Tyrann Mathieu, and rookie DBs typically struggle in their first year. I'm talking about Trent McDuffie, who they took in the first round. I don't expect that defensive coverage or the defensive backs there to really take a step up. They were a pretty bad unit last year, and I don't anticipate them being significantly better right out the gates. So I'm going to say a lot of the receiving options on the Cardinals will have tremendous games. And just because of the projected points, it's going to be a pretty positive game script for throwing the ball. Kyler Murray he is a very explosive offensive weapon, will throw the ball down the field. So obviously Kyler is a smash play. Expect him to absolutely churn and rack up the points. James Conner, Marquise Brown. Ertz is healthy. If Ertz is out, I'm playing AJ Green. That's a name we haven't heard for a long time, but if Ertz doesn't play for whatever reason, AJ Green will be fantasy relevant this week. That's just the nature of the game with these super high scoring games. Again, this is ripe for fantasy points. 2 dynamic offenses, 2 subpar defenses, and a lot of points all around. Moving on to my 4th matchup to exploit this week, and that's going to be the Raiders versus the Chargers. I mean, Chargers versus Raiders, that's a no-brainer, so that's why it's not on this list. Everyone's going to play all their Chargers players. No one needs me to tell them that, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that I have extreme confidence in the Raiders' offensive pieces in this game as well. Pretty high over-under at 52 points, and even though the Chargers are favored by 3, that still leaves with the Raiders with the projected points of 24.5. The new star in coverage that the Chargers have signed in J.C. Jackson is dealing with a back injury with no timetable to return, which is very concerning and obviously a huge blow to that defense as they went out, and that was one of their biggest name signings along with trading for Khalil Mack this offseason. So even with Derwin James back there being potentially the best safety in the league, the fact that they lost their best cornerback is extremely concerning. So a lot of the pass catching options for the Raiders should be pretty viable in this game. And even if there is not that much loss with JC Jackson, listen, it's still going to be a positive game script for pass catchers because we already talked about how explosive that Chargers offense is. And if they put up points, then the Raiders will absolutely need to air out the ball and make their way down the field as fast as possible to continue with that offensive onslaught that we expect from the Chargers. So looking to see that Adams is definitely a must start. Jacobs, I know he's been concerning as someone whose 5th-year option has been declined and one of those dreaded RB dead zone guys. I'm definitely playing him this game. Hunter Renfrow, definitely a startable asset. Wide receiver 2 potential here. Waller has had some concern with his knee injury and contract negotiations. If you got Waller, you're definitely playing him for this game. And then Superflex Carr, I think, is definitely someone who can get after the ball and someone who's going to put up a lot of yards and even a couple touchdowns to help him have a pretty fantasy relevant week. So yeah, confidence in all starters on the Raiders offense. My last matchup to exploit this week is going to be another game that has an over-under over 50, and that's going to be the Cowboys versus the Bucs. The over-under right now is set at 51, with Tampa Bay favored by 2.5 points, which is funny because if you go to the ESPN app right now, it's actually 60% likely that the Cowboys win this game. How do you explain that one to me? I don't know. I'm not a computer whiz. I don't deal with AI, but that's what their projections say. So based on ESPN, I would bet money line on the Cowboys, but this is not a gambling channel. This is a fantasy football channel. This leaves Cowboys with another projected point total of 24.5. And I do think that the Cowboys will hit the over on the 24.5 point mark just because the defensive line for the Bucs has taken a step back. Even though Sue was on the older side and the wrong side of 30, he was still a pretty good force up there in the middle on the Bucs defensive line. Also, that line is extremely old. Vita Vea, Akeem Hicks, Carl Nassib, Marquise Goldston. The youngest one of those guys is Vita Vea at 27, and 2 of those guys are 32. So they're definitely pretty much in a retirement home as far as fantasy football in the NFL is concerned. I don't think they're going to be the elite run-stopping defense that we have seen in the past. Because of that, I think Zeke will actually have a pretty decent game, even though people are leaning away from him. Tony Pollard, especially in this game, with Michael Gallup, his status still pretty questionable around that recovery from the ACL. Also, if we expect the Buccaneers offense to be what they are supposed to be with Brady, Godwin, Julio Jones, Russell Gage, Mike Evans, obviously, then it's going to be a pretty positive game script for passing offense. And we know that Tony Pollard is going to be heavily involved in the pass game today or pass game this year per Mike McCarthy. So a lot of those assets I'm starting with confidence. Zeke is going to be running back 2, encroaching on running back 1 territory this week. CeeDee Lamb is a must play. Dalton Schultz is a must play. Pollard will be an absolute smash flex only, secondary to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Dak is a must start in this game as well, given what I think is going to be a huge step back for the Bucs in their rushing offense, and Dak's reported higher confidence in his ankle, and Mike McCarthy coming out and saying that they're going to design more runs for Dak as well. I think he's going to have a tremendous game. All right, that being said, let's recap our 5 matchups that we want to exploit this week for fantasy points that I'm pretty confident in. Falcons at Saints, Chiefs at Cardinals, conversely Cardinals at Chiefs, Raiders versus Chargers, because everyone and their mom knows to start all their Chargers assets, but I'm confident the other side of the ball. And finally, Cowboys versus the Bucs. Very confident that's going to be a high-scoring affair. So finally, let's go to our matchup of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
All right, so as you saw from that lovely graphic, the game of the week this week, to the absolute shock of no one, is tonight's game, Bills at Rams. This is another game where points will be aplenty because it's yet another game with the over-under. Over 50 points. It's currently set at 52 with the Bills favored by 2.5. That leaves projected points for the Bills being at 28.5 and the Rams at 23.5. So projected to have 7 touchdowns and change between the two teams, so fantasy points aplenty in this game. And I believe this weekend set the record for most games with an over-under above 50 points for the opening weekend of an NFL. So just going to show you that the trend in the NFL is towards offensive weapons, and fantasy points and players that are relevant to your team will be ever more increasing as compared to past seasons. So obviously, why I like this game, it is going to be probably a good chance that it's a preview of the Super Bowl at the end of this year. I got to get a little nostalgic. It is the first game of true NFL football we've seen in 8 months. That also has a little bit of a hype to it, but these are 2 of the best teams in the NFL, and I expect, again, points to be aplenty, despite these teams both having 2 of the top 10 defenses in the NFL currently. Listen, it's week 1. There's no tape to study. You're not playing your starters, especially on the Rams side in preseason. There's going to be growing pains, especially bringing in new players, Bobby Wagner on the Rams side, Von Miller on the Bills side. So, things haven't gelled completely. Things aren't fleshed out completely. And, offenses will look to take advantage of that. Again, there's a lot of stars in this game, and we expect all those stars to shine the brightest under the bright lights of primetime football. So let's talk startable assets. Listen, everyone and their mother is startable in this game. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs are obviously the obvious ones on the Bills side. Gabe Davis is going to be a smash play for all those Gabe Davis truthers out there. Dawson Knox, he just signed a massive 4-year extension this morning, so expect him to be a huge part of that Bills offense this year and going forward. Devin Singletary, I expect him to carry on the production that he had towards the end of last year. And with James Cook, even though he's a rookie, he won't be truly impactful and truly worked into the offense until later on in the season. So expect Devin Singletary to be active in this game. On the Rams side, Stafford, Kupp, Allen Robinson are all guys you need to start. Darrell Henderson, if there's any, even with Cam Akers playing and being healthy, we can see that Sean McVay is leaning away from his previous mindset that he had with Todd Gurley and a true 3-down workhorse back. I believe it's going to be a pretty even split between Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers, and just with the offensive explosion that this game is supposed to be, Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers should both get their fair share of fantasy touches and should make decent flex options. So that's going to be the most fun game, and we get it tonight. So very excited that we get to kick off the NFL season that way. Let's move on to my guys for the weekend. These are guys that not necessarily waiver wire guys. Some may be throughout the season if I'm extremely confident in them. But also, this is not going to be like, oh yeah, Derrick Henry, definitely play him this weekend, because that's a no-brainer. I'm talking about guys that are maybe fringe flex players for you, or maybe sitting on your bench that you need extra confidence in starting for the week going forward. So I got 5 my guys for this weekend. It is not sponsored by Five Guys, even though I do love their burgers. But let's get into it. The first my guy for this weekend is Kareem Hunt. I know he's sitting out there, probably a fringe flex player for a lot of guys, but listen, he should be started this week. I have him starting in both of my main leagues, and this is why. Baker, come on. He's coming back to play the Browns, and he's going to be aggressive with the football. He's going to be aggressive with his game plan. That's going to either lead to one of two results. First one is it's going to be a ton of turnovers, and the Browns are just going to rush the ball and take the ball out of Jacoby Brissett's hands as much as possible. We obviously know that Nick Chubb is the 1A back there, but Kareem Hunt is the 1B back, and if the game gets out of hand, Kareem Hunt's going to be taking most of the touches out of the backfield, and he will be racking up a ton of points, especially in garbage time. The second option is Baker Mayfield actually plays well and runs up a ton of points on the Browns. In that case, you're going to have to see Jacoby Brissett lean on the passing game and to really engage the offense to move down the field more quickly. And Kareem Hunt is by far the second best pass catcher on that team behind Amari Cooper, so expect him to be utilized in the pass game if they get behind at any point in time, and the ball will be taken out of Nick Chubb's hands, even though he's the best runner. So that's how I see Kareem Hunt being useful in a multitude of ways this weekend, and he's definitely a must start for week one. Secondly, we're going into Drake London, probably sitting there as a wide receiver 3, maybe even a wide receiver 4 on most teams, but there's a lot of issues raised by the fact that he played one catch in preseason, was injured and didn't play the rest of the preseason, and just started working back into practice this past Monday. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who are concerned with the injury, with the fact that this is a sub-tier offense. And I'm here to say that, listen, you should start him and have full confidence starting him going forward. CD Deuce, as we talked about, is no longer a Saint, which leaves the Saints pretty depleted in the secondary. I understand. We already discussed why I don't have that much faith in Marshawn Lattimore. I understand Tyrann Mathieu is going to be there as a safety. However, Tyrann Mathieu doesn't combat anything to which Drake London is good at. Tyrann Mathieu is 5'9" and very undersized. He's 8 inches shorter than Drake London, and Drake London is known for high pointing the ball, winning contested catches, going up and getting those jump balls, and is just a yak monster. Everything that is designed to beat Tyrann Mathieu, so I don't think Tyrann Mathieu is going to be much of a factor unless he tries to kind of sweep the legs out from under Drake London and re-injure that knee. So, again, I believe in Marcus Mariota a little bit more than the average person, so with that, I'm starting Drake London in full confidence. Third player I alluded to before during the Chiefs-Cardinals matchups, and matchups to exploit, and that's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Listen, this game has the highest over-under and highest projected points of any team for the Chiefs at 29. We talked about how depleted that run defense is on the Cards side after losing Chandler Jones to the Raiders. And even though MVS, Juju, and Sky Moore will all be new, and we talked about their involvement in the offense in some way, say it with me now, historically vacated targets go to the running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire already has a rapport with Patrick Mahomes. I think if the Chiefs do get up on the Cardinals, they're going to rely heavily on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I think both his pass catching and his running are going to be, result in a pretty juicy fantasy day for Clyde come week one. Number 4, I know there's a little bit of injury concern with this guy as well, but Alan Lazard. And I was kind of always curious as to why he's going so late in drafts, but I understand there's a risk there. He's never really been the alpha wide receiver before, and you may see him sitting on your bench and be wondering if you can start him. And my advice is yes, definitely start him in your flex spot this week. Kind of a similar train of a thought to what I talked about with Clyde, is he's the only returning wide receiver to this offense. He has an established rapport with Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers, as we know, kind of a weirdo, only throws to guys he trusts, really favors veterans and tenured players on his team. I don't think the Vikings secondary has really done anything to improve themselves. They re-signed Patrick Peterson, which is a very bizarre move, and he was terrible in coverage last year if you look at his PFF coverage grades. I know they did sign a couple DBs, and they drafted a couple DBs, including Lewis Seen, but as we discussed previously, defensive back is one of the hardest positions to translate to the NFL, and it takes a while for safeties and cornerbacks, unless you're Sauce Gardner, apparently, it takes a while for them to really acclimate to the NFL, so I don't really anticipate much resistance for any of those wide receivers that Aaron Rodgers is going to be favoring in this game versus the Vikings. Also, we know historically that Aaron Rodgers loves to pick on rookie DBs, whether it's the safety or the cornerback. There's times where against Jeff Okudah, I think he threw to him like 9 times in a row against the Lions. So if they put someone like that on Allard, someone like that on Alan Lazard, I guess his new nickname is Allard, but I expect Aaron Rodgers to absolutely test that DB and completely pepper Alan Lazard with targets. And so I think he's an absolute smash play this weekend and someone you can definitely sell high on after the first few games. This final guy, my guy, I am so confident in. I've been tweeting about him all week. It is Nyheim Hines. He needs to be in your lineup this week if you have him on your team. Absolutely in love with the opportunity that's presented to him this week. Texans are a bottom 5 team, and the one bright spot on their defense is Derek Stingley, who will be shadowing Marcus Pittman the entirety of the day. So, their best defensive assets already covered up, and it's going to take away Michael Pittman's upside just a little bit. It's going to leave Nyheim Hines, honestly, as the second best pass catcher on this team. Frank Reich has been very vocal about how they are going to incorporate Nyheim Hines into the offensive game plan this season. So with Derek Stingley on Pittman and the fact that we expect Houston to be an absolute garbage team, expect this game to get out of hand really, really quickly. So now that translates into an incredibly positive script for the run game. And listen, if it gets to the second half and they're up by two touchdowns, expect Jonathan Taylor to be pulled out of the game. They're not going to risk their star running back. And so for the majority of the third and fourth quarter, expect Nyheim Hines to be the ones taking the handoffs out of the backfield, the one accumulating all those garbage time points, small dump offs, and racking up the points well into the final fourth quarter of the game. Frank Reich has come out and said that they don't want Jonathan Taylor to be this insane workhorse. They don't anticipate giving him. He said he does not want Jonathan Taylor to have the most touches in the league. They want to conserve him. They want to make sure he's healthy come playoff time because they believe they can have a playoff run, especially in week 1 against a team like the Texans. If it gets out of hand, look for Nyheim Hines to be the main back and potentially outscore Jonathan Taylor this week. Crazy. But listen, you got to play Nyheim Hines this week. That's all I'm saying. Those are my 5 guys. Have them recapped, listed right here in this lovely graphic. And we will circle back around on Tuesday, hold myself accountable. We'll give a grade for every single player that I picked in my guys and kind of track that as the season goes along. So just to recap, Kareem Hunt, Drake London, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Alan Lazard, Nyheim Hines are guys that are going to need to be either flexed or put in your wide receiver or running back 2 position to help you win this week. So that kind of wraps it up. Every Thursday, I will leave you with a parting thought, as this will be the last filmed content of the week before the Sunday at hand. So we'll have the segment, Last Thoughts.
There's only one thing that I'm not clear about.
Actually, there is one thing.
One other thing.
So for week 1, my last thought that I want to leave you with before we head into the weekend is be patient on breakout wide receivers. There's a lot of wide receivers that we have this year that are projected for massive breakouts, but surprisingly, after doing a lot of research on these games, there's 6 that I've identified that are put in particularly challenging situations that may not yield instant results. Do not panic. Just wait, and I'm about to explain here. Rashad Bateman, he's going to have Sauce Gardner shadowing him the entire game because there really is no other receiving asset down the field other than Rashad Bateman on the Ravens. Obviously, Sauce was amazing in preseason. 0 catches, 0 targets, 0 yards allowed, and obviously 0 touchdowns. So Sauce is the real deal, and I expect him to lock up Bateman all day. This is a really weak Jets team outside of that position, so I expect the Ravens to really rely on the run. Lamar Jackson is going to definitely be running the ball, dumping off to Mark Andrews, controlling the game. I don't expect a huge passing game from either Lamar, Bateman, or the Ravens. So Rashad Bateman is a great wide receiver. There will be other games where his talents will be utilized. It just won't be in this game, as it's going to get out of control early, and the Ravens are just going to rely on the run to finish out the game. Elijah Moore, very, very high on Elijah Moore this year. However, he is facing the best secondary in the league against the Ravens, and also there's a ton of uncertainty at quarterback with Zach Wilson's injury. Joe Flacco will come out, and I know there's been production before, but Elijah Moore is facing Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Peters, Chuck Clark. This is insane, okay? I don't expect my expectations for Elijah Moore is that he might get a couple catches. I don't expect him to get a touchdown. This is going to be a very bad week, but that's what happens when you face the best secondary in the league. Be patient. Elijah Moore is that talented. Darnell Mooney. Listen, I like Darnell Mooney. I like his status as a rising asset in fantasy football. This is a really bad game for him. Top 5 defense in San Francisco. Obviously, we saw that the Bears have the absolute worst O-line. Don't take it from me. We saw it in preseason, and currently PFF grades them as the worst O-line. And given that San Francisco has a top 5 defensive line in the NFL, they will be under fire all game. Fields will not be able to stay in the pocket, will not allow time for routes to develop, and won't be able to throw the ball downfield. It's going to be absolute anarchy in that backfield all game long for the Bears. I project it's going to be a massive blowout on the side of the 49ers. Also, Fields is still developing that rapport with Darnell Mooney. If we go back to last season, over the course of the last 8 games, Darnell Mooney had a really great stretch of production. He had, out of the last 8 games, he had 4 games in which he produced 17 or more fantasy points. However, in 2 of those games, 2 of those 8 games, Justin Fields start. And that was versus Arizona and versus Green Bay. And versus Arizona, Darnell Mooney had 5 fantasy points. Versus Green Bay, Darnell Mooney had 2 fantasy points. So we understand that Darnell Mooney's breakout at the end of last season did not come with Justin Fields. It's going to take time for them to develop that connection, and I don't expect Darnell Mooney to pick off where he did last season based on the quarterback situation. Devontae Smith, kind of similar to Rashad Bateman, the fact that they're playing a very weak defense in the Lions. Starting out, Sirianni will definitely rely on a greater running-based scheme, just based on how successful they were last year coming down the stretch with their running game. Assuming that's going to be more design plays for Brown to get him incorporated in the offense. Obviously, you want to feed your new star asset, really get him involved in the offense, make him feel good. And then once they get out of hand, I think it's going to be a real kind of committee split between Sanders, Boston Scott, and Kenneth Gainwell to really finish out the game in the second half. I don't think Devontae Smith is going to be a huge asset in this game. He's going to be good. We saw talent last year. He's into his sophomore season as a wide receiver. I love what he can do, just not in this game. So be patient. My 5th wide receiver is going to be Brandon Ayuk, and we've heard all the hype coming out from training camp and that he's not in the doghouse with Kyle Shanahan this year. He's absolutely transformed the way he played his game. However, Trey Lance is still very raw and has a massive learning curve, so we don't know how he's going to react under game time pressure against an actual NFL defense. Shanahan will rely on the run game, I'm predicting, in order to support Lance and ease the burden on the young QB. Lance will most likely scramble much more than wait for a route to develop downfield, such as what Jimmy Garoppolo did. So don't expect those quick dump offs or those passes, like those Hail Mary passes with the long bomb plays where Brandon Ayuk can work to get open and really work to get separation from the DB. I think after 4 or 5 seconds in the pocket, Lance will just try to scramble and will take away target opportunities from Ayuk. And finally, they're facing potentially the worst team in the NFL in the Bears. And once they kind of get up on them and the game gets a little bit out of hand, I think it's going to be a pretty negative game script for the pass game, and Shanahan's just going to rely on committee backfield approach to run out the game, literally. Finally, Michael Pittman, I still expect him to produce, but it's not going to be, the 3rd round overall super hype 20-point play that we saw. Kind of similar to why I'm super high on Nyheim Hines, is why I'm a little down on Pittman in the first week. He's going to be shadowed by 3rd overall pick Derek Stingley, who himself was no slouch in the preseason. Again, Houston's a terrible team, and I expect this game to get out of hand extremely quickly. So it's going to shift to a very, very run-focused offense, even as early as the second quarter, maybe mid-3rd quarter. And I expect Pittman to be not targeted, maybe even taken off the field entirely, as Frank Reich has put a high priority on conserving his stars and making sure that they stay healthy throughout the season. So that's my last thought. Very excited for week 1. I hope this information helped you set your lineups, figure out which matchups to exploit. If you're kind of on the decision with some of those my guys, I give you full confidence to start those my guys. I know they're going to do well for fantasy this weekend, and enjoy the first slate of games. Take care.